And we are joined right now by Mike Chat, Blue Ranger. Mike, how are you today, sir?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for being here, Mike. Before we kind of jump into all things Power Rangers and just the extraordinary things that you have done in your career so far, kind of walk us through where it all began. What is kind of your origin story?
Um, wow, all the way back there. I was born in the jungles of Thailand. My parents were visiting, and I grew up in Chicago. And my dad and I grew up watching kung fu movies all Sunday. And so there was a channel, Samurai Sunday, and kung fu movies played. We would go out and do yard work in the morning and then come back, eat ramen noodles, watch kung fu movies. That was it. I was a huge fan. I dreamed of flying through the air and doing cool fights and sword, fights, 20 kicks, landing in cool poses, and that was it. I just always wanted to do martial arts. So then my parents thought it was too dangerous though. So finally they said, when you're eight, every year for my birthday, I wanted martial arts lessons. And they said, when you're 8 years old, then you can join. So I did, and that was it. Started competing, all throughout my childhood. Stopped all the other sports. Soccer, baseball, swam year round, tennis. I did everything, and then just stopped everything for martial arts competitions. And got cast in my first show at 19, WMAC Masters. It was the number one Fox TV show at the time, and then came Power Rangers.
Did you watch Power Rangers at all growing up?
Of course. So from the, like everybody during that time, if you were into action, if you were into martial arts, you were watching Power Rangers for sure. And so there were several of the tournament competitors, especially one of my teammates, former Team Paul Mitchell competitor. He has passed since, but Richard Brandon, he went on to the show, was doing stunts for the show. And when I moved to LA, while I was in college, he introduced me to a bunch of the stunt people, the stunt coordinator, Jeff Pruitt at the time. And, I kind of got a taste of, what it was like to just, be around a set, to see the putties in action, right? And, from there it was like, wow, that would be amazing to you do anything on the show, and so that was about 4 years before I actually auditioned for the show.
So, what was the audition process like? Is it something where they do a big, wide casting call for it? Does your agent come up to you and be like, "Listen, they're looking like this is your time"?
Yeah, exactly that. So they did the nationwide, actually not nationwide, it was a worldwide casting call. Iris Hampton, the first and the only casting director for Power Rangers, she had said later that it was approximately 6 to 7 thousand teens and young adults that we were up against. Yeah, and it was normal to do, 6, 7 rounds of auditioning. Our season did 9. So, well, I did 9. I believe Keith Robinson, the Green Ranger, he did 8 or 9, but they had cast somebody else, and so didn't work out. They brought us back in. They brought Keith in to test with all of us, and so there were an extra, I think, 2 rounds of auditioning that we had to go through.
And what is the auditioning process?
So, you get your audition side. So they give you a scene and you got to learn the scene. You go in. This was when auditions were in person. So you go in, you read for an assistant. It was not the head casting director. You read for an assistant. There, I don't even think they put me on tape. So they weren't even filming at the time. So first round, they just want to see you. They're trying to get through everybody. Um, and they want to see if you have any martial arts experience. If you do, then they ask you to perform. So of course I did a quick 30 seconds of my best martial art moves. I was in my prime as a martial art competitor. Actually just finished competing after competition, then went into the acting world. So I was still in my prime, did my best 30 seconds. And, they're like, okay, great. Thank you. And then you leave. It's super fast. You walk in, before you know it, you're walking out. You're just like, what happened? I didn't even remember, the details of what happened. It happened so fast. Then, I got the call back. So agent, calls and said, hey, they want to see you again. Great. Second time, go in, it's the same scene. And, of course, then, I want to make sure that I nail it. Everything's perfect. It was the same process each time. So then did my martial arts, but this time, the second time for sure, it was on tape, and they filmed it. And then, did that round. They call you back, third, fourth round. I believe it was the fifth round where then they basically, it was like a test with the other actors. So I believe there were 5 groups. So they had selected 5 actors for, Red Ranger candidates, 5 Blue Ranger, 5 Yellow, 5, So then we went in and we read multiple times. So you go and you read, you go back out into the waiting room, right? And you just sit there and wait and wait and wait. I'm sure you've heard the stories, but you just sit and wait. And then after like 5 hours, you're done. Go home. And we're thinking, okay, like this could be it, right? Callback. Another producer director callback. So then we go in again. We do the whole thing. And then, so I forgot one important part. Before the producer callback, they send you a contract. And they have you sign the contract beforehand. So there's no negotiating. And you don't know if you're going to get it or not, but you've already signed on in case they like you. And so that happened. Then, we were thinking after the second producer director callback, they were going to make their final decision. And that's when we were called back in again. And because of, the Green Ranger role. So then there were two final callbacks. The one thing that I'll say that was interesting for me is I walk into the final. This is the final audition. I walk in, Koichi Sakamoto is in the room. Do you know Koichi?
No.
Okay, Koichi Sakamoto at the time was the stunt coordinator and second year director for the show. Sure. The first 10 seasons, nothing happened on the action side without Koichi, and that's why the show was so popular. Of course the Rangers, but then his style of action. So he was in the room. I knew of him, and I had worked with Yuji Noguchi on my first show, WMAC Masters. He was my fight coordinator, so I knew Yuji was on the show as a stunt double, and then I knew and had heard of the infamous Koichi. So I walk in the room, I see Koichi, and the first thing he says is, "Mike, so good to see you." I'm like, "Oh, so great to meet you." And he's like, "I'm so excited that you're here." In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, that's why I made it all the way down, 6,000 feet, because he wanted a martial artist. Okay. So later I find out he had just flown in from Japan. He had no idea who was in the final rounds, was not part of any of it. So that was kind of cool to find out that, oh, okay, well, I made it through, and it wasn't, with the help of the second unit director. But that was a nice surprise, because knowing that he was on the board essentially gave me a boost of confidence, because I knew that he wanted, I'm assuming he wanted at the time, strong martial artists, for the show.
So
that was it.
You get it. You find out you're going to be the Blue Ranger. Walk us through what that has to feel like. Who did you tell first? Like, that's got to be one of the coolest things in the world.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it's when people say, you're living the dream, it really is, because even just like, it was months and months into shooting that you kind of, reality sets in, because you're just on a high. And for me, being a world champion martial artist, I grew up my whole life, the other cast members, they're actors. They were not lifelong martial artists. They didn't spend night and day, eating, sleeping, drinking martial art and kung fu fight scenes, right? So, but I did. So for me, it was the pinnacle. It was everything that I had ever wanted. And more important than any other type of show, to do Power Rangers at the, this was just after the height of Jason David Frank, and it was just a worldwide phenomenon at the time. And so for me, it was everything. It was amazing. Um, who did I tell? Of course, I told my family, I told my martial arts instructor, Sensei Sharky, and then it was like right into training, a month worth of training, because we were already behind in casting several weeks because of the issue with the Green Ranger role. So then I think it was supposed to be a 2.5 month lead into filming, and we had less than 30 days to prep. So that was it. And we were off and running. We were training every day, and then we started shooting, and it was much later where it really just sank in that, wow, it's like I'm gonna be a Power Ranger. Even though I was filming it, it hadn't come out yet. So the thought is like, I'm gonna be a Power Ranger, as if I'm not already playing one. But it doesn't come out for, several months. So it just didn't seem real until we actually saw the first episode. That's when it was like, look, there we are. Yeah.
When do you put the suit on for the first time, and what's that like?
Uh, well, for me, it was super cool. For everybody, the big joke was that we're all putting on spandex, right? And so for the cast, it was a mix of this is super cool, and this is everyone's looking at their bodies and like covering their bodies like they're in underwear, because like Lululemon and all of the yoga fitness you know apparel for women, that was not a trend back then. So for a woman to wear leggings out in public, that was like, ooh, very risque at the time. So for us to be walking around in spandex, that was even more of a mental kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, just you put on the suit, you got the boots. I mean, we morph into the suits, right? And it just comes on, and then you've got the gloves and the boots and the belt and the tasers, and I mean, you know, it's probably exactly like the cosplayers who grew up watching the show, and then they might order their helmet and their suit from Aniki Cosplay, right? And then they finally get it after waiting 6 months or a year, and then they put it on, right? It's just like unimaginable until you actually do it yourself.
One of the biggest questions that we get, and I think it's because Power Rangers is so unique in that the footage isn't all American footage. A lot of it is the
Hmm.
Japanese based footage. So one of the questions that we got a ton when we announced you were coming on the show was how much of it, not like the speaking parts where you guys have your helmets off or whatnot, but how much of the in costume stuff is actually you guys compared to footage that they have from the Japanese show?
That's a great question, and most people assume that anything Ranger and the toys, it's all Japanese footage, and it's not. So in my season, I can't say for the subsequent seasons. What they did was every 22-minute episode, there was about 7 to 8 minutes of Japanese footage, and the Japanese footage was solely comprised of the footage where you would see the Zords, the Megazord, any of the toys. If it was Rangers with full helmets and the Batlings, or Vipra, all of that was shot stateside. So it was only the toy footage. We did everything else.
So going into your season for Rangers, you had a contract. So did you know it was going to be Lightspeed Rescue and that was it? Was there any sort of like potential for when they transition to the next era, you might stick around for that era, or like what did you know going in how long your Ranger tenure was going to be?
Yes, they had already established, because I was season 8. So after the first 4 Mighty Morphin seasons, they had established that every year they would recast. And part of that had to do with SAG and negotiations that had happened prior to our season. So we knew that we were going to be recast, but there was always talk of a potential movie, which it didn't happen. But it was something that they were working very hard on at the time. It just didn't materialize.
And then you were called back for an episode of Time Force, right?
Yes. So what they did was the format was that each season would then come back for a team up episode. And that was kind of part of the transition into the new season, that there would always be this team up episode where, the fans would, have something to look forward to, right in the beginning of the new season.
So before we get to our fan specific Power Ranger questions, because I have like 8 or 9 of them, walk
Mm-hmm.
us through life after a Power Ranger, because you did amazing things before you were a Power Ranger, and then you did even more amazing things after you were a Power Ranger. And oh, by the way, you were a Power Ranger. So much in your career from before you were being a Ranger to now. So Power Rangers ends. What's next? Are you just like, oh, it was great?
It was great, and what I wanted to do was transition into more TV, more films, and then become the next action star. So, and this was at the time where they were auditioning for the first Mortal Kombat movie. So, what I realized in hindsight was, first I'm all in. I'm gonna pursue this. I get into an acting class, and I'm super uncomfortable. I mean, I was just on TV. I did 42 episodes, and I get in an acting class. And what I realized in hindsight is that, I trained my whole life to become a martial artist, not to be vulnerable in front of other people. I was the superstar in martial arts, and I can go on a stage and perform for crowds of 20,000. I would perform in the Olympic halls in Dortmund and Munich and in France, but interpersonal with just, a director and a couple actors, and really getting into dramatic acting, I hit some walls. So I auditioned, I killed it with commercials. I had like 15 national network commercials running at one time during a single year. But knowing what I know now, looking back, I would audition and, I was not on par with where I needed to be as a dramatic actor. So also, I still looked very young, but was getting too old to play high school, teenager, and even though I was 24, 25 at the time, too young to play the adult roles where they were casting 30-year-olds to play 24, 25. So, I fell in this in-between category look-wise. I needed much deeper acting training. I got a lot of opportunities in the martial arts world, and you had to pay the bills. I had a young family.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was about, okay, well, I need to work. So I developed the XMA Extreme Martial Art Training Program that went to over 1,500 schools worldwide, and then started working with the American Taekwondo Association, developing leadership programs with one of my partners, Chief Master von Schmeling. He's one of the largest school operators in the country for martial arts. And we develop leadership programs, train thousands of instructors all over the country, multiple times a year, and develop product lines, with the XMA brand. It was fantastic. So that's what immediately followed Rangers. And then, for about 15 years, I, was in and out of doing stunts and different things, but primarily focused on martial art businesses and traveling and doing seminars and events and appearances around the world.
Awesome. All right, so we got some quick Ranger questions for you. First of all, obviously you're holding the helmet in your hand. Is that the helmet from the show?
This is actually a replica.
Okay.
This is by Aniki Cosplay. I have my original helmet. It's a little beat up, and the blue has faded. So this looks better on camera, and I wanted to bring it on and thank Aniki, because he makes incredible products, and he has for many years. My boys went to school, a special school in Bali called the Green School, for a year, and I didn't get to meet Aniki because he's on another island, but a big fan of the Indonesian people. So I wanted to show this one. No one's seen this one before. They've always seen the old one.
No, that's awesome. It looks really, really sharp.
Yeah.
Besides your helmet, did you keep anything else from the show?
Oh my gosh. So many things. I mean, one, every single toy. So Bandai was the toy company at the time. So every single toy that they sent us, and we have, my Blue Ranger. I've got all the other Rangers in a box set. All of the Zords and the Megazords and Morphers and lasers. And then I've got all those in boxes and storage. But then things like the mermaid episode that I did. It was a two-part episode. Jonathan Zakor, the executive producer, directed those two episodes, and there was this little box that had a dolphin in it, that was part of the mermaid scenes that I had. There's little cards that were the Batlings would throw these cards, and they would have Batling designs on them. I mean, so many different little tchotchkes, as you would call it, but things that either came from set. I had the Lightspeed Rescue sign that I got from the like they were just getting rid of everything, and then what wasn't going to go into storage, like we had access to everything. So it would have been cool to actually get bigger set pieces, but I had the sign and all the Lightspeed letters that were up inside the aqua base. So that was cool.
Have you met a lot of the other Rangers since you've been a Ranger yourself?
Depends on the season. Now that it's going on 30 years, there are many seasons that I missed. I will say though, the Beast Morphers season. So throughout the years, Iris and Chuck, they would call and they wanted help training the actors and prepping them for the show, right, during the audition process. So I was always helping. Dan Southworth and I go way back. We've been friends since he lived in San Jose from when I first moved out to California after high school. But Beast Morphers, so I wind up, I have two of my students, Jacqueline Sislowski and Liana Ramirez. They both booked the show. In the process, then I had Colby, Rory, Jazz, and Abraham. So these four others come in, and we trained extensively to prep them, and all six of them booked the show, which that's never happened. But that was an amazing season. And so I was very close with those guys. And then just with my own cast, we've gotten together multiple times over the years. We all still keep in touch. We were incredibly close during filming, and we've maintained a really great relationship, over the years.
Obviously, you will always be tied to the Blue Ranger, but growing up as a fan of Power Rangers, if you could have picked your color, would blue have been the color you would have picked?
Absolutely not. So, here's the lesson I learned. Coming from the martial arts background, being a world champion, I wanted to be the leader. The Red Ranger was the leader. So I was way ahead of my time. I wanted to break the precedent of a Caucasian Red Ranger and be the first ethnic, Red Ranger. When we all met for the first time, and I met Sean C.W. Johnson, my first reaction was, he looks like a Red Ranger. Like I remember like looking at him from the side, and he's got such a strong jawline, and he's taller than me. He has a very strong physical presence, right, and great energy. So that I just distinctly remember that was because I wanted to see who's this guy, right? And once I met him, I was like, okay, like he fits the part. And then we all became best friends. So it worked out. It worked out really, really well.
So a little like fan fiction question here. If you
Mhm.
as the Blue Ranger could team up with any other one Ranger or any other era of Rangers, what are you thinking?
Oh,
I know.
well,
I know.
so let's just start here. Jason, David, Frank, and I we had been circling around each other for so many years, both being martial artists. He ran martial arts schools. I had my school. We were in the same industry. We would see each other at the martial arts super show multiple years in a row in Vegas. And over the pandemic, we were in touch we were working on like different project ideas something that we could, sink our teeth into and work on together. He had already, started on, Legend of the White Lotus, the project. And so we were looking. So that, that would have been an amazing opportunity. Unfortunately, wouldn't be able to happen now, but that would have been number one for sure. I loved working with Archie. Archie's, a super cool guy and super talented. And so he was from Lost Galaxy the season before. Got to work with him on the team up. We circled, around Hollywood, same auditions, different shows. We never had the opportunity to work together again after that. Um, and then just with my students, like it would be so cool to jump in there with my students and, go a few rounds and just, be there because, we had been part of the development process with them.
I'm not going to ask you to do it, but I'm assuming you can morph on command.
Yes, Lightspeed Rescue, but no more for today. Of course.
uh, are you the greatest Blue Ranger of all time?
Uh, that's up to the fans to decide. What I hope that I brought to the show was a personality and a level of action that they didn't get to see often because most of the actors were not longtime martial artists, let alone, I mean, many of them, like, Keith and Sean, even Sasha, like they had taken martial arts before, but it wasn't like they weren't black belts. They didn't spend 3 to 5 years or their whole childhood doing it, let alone competing. So, hopefully, if anything stands out, then they can say, yeah, we got to see him fight without his helmet on, more and do some cool things and, bring my style of action to the Rangers legacy.
One of the coolest things about Power Rangers is because it's been on so long, depending on how old you were when you watched
Hmm.
Power Rangers, you naturally have a different favorite Ranger than someone who's,
Yeah.
5 or 6 years older or younger than you, just because
Yes.
that's what your vision of Power Rangers was from age, 8 to 12 or whatever the prime Power Ranger watching time is. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of the coolest things with the show because we've had different people on and Power Rangers comes up a lot because we cover nostalgia and it's very nostalgic. But unless you're about the same age, you have a different opinion of who the
Right.
greatest Rangers are because I grew up with the original Mighty Morphin and I
Hmm.
kind of trail off around like after they go to space, I trail off a little bit. But that's just where my natural Power Ranger progression ended. But
Hmm.
someone who is, 5 years younger than me, them in space, that was like the start of their progression. Like that's where their Power Rangers journey begins. So it's just so
Right.
cool to have these Power Rangers conversations with people because literally it's the whole gambit. And then you have a group of kids now who are still watching the show. Those are going to
Hmm.
be their favorite Rangers. So it's
Yeah.
just such a cool thing. Do you have a favorite villain or a favorite Ranger outside of your season in general?
Um, well, favorite Ranger for sure, JDF. I mean, he, for me, because he was a martial artist, I knew his instructor. I wound up competing against his instructor in international competition once I moved into the adult divisions. But the Red Dragon, he comes from the Red Dragon martial arts organization here in Southern California. And, they're known to produce top competitors. Chris Casamassa was his Shihan. And, you know, like we had a camaraderie that was very special because of that background. And for him to be, the most popular ranger of all time, um, but actually be a martial artist, right? That was the key for me. And I mean, it's like everything from it going worldwide to then shutting down the 101 freeway, at the Universal event that they did. I lived through all of that, right? It's like a lot of these kids that I train for Power Rangers now, they grew up like playing a Power Ranger for Halloween, right? Like I knew these people from tournaments, and so that's why it was so special for me. So forever it'll be JDF. And then what was the second part of the question?
Do you have a favorite villain?
Favorite villain? I think probably just so I'm gonna have to say Vipra from my season, because we were all such great friends and we got along so well that like I didn't connect with anybody else, right? It was the people on my season. So
That makes sense.
yeah.
All right. So, what are you doing now? Where can we find you? Any upcoming projects? What's going on in your life?
So I made a transition after selling my world headquarters. Wanted to get back into the acting, I thought, and did that for a little bit. Did some action directing. I've got a film. It's called Absolute Dominion. I play one of the leads. I'm the number one ranked fighter in the world. It's an amazing story. Female director, Alexi Alexander, writer, and it's a Netflix film that'll be coming out probably this fall. But there's a lot of CG. I'm co-producing with David Leitch and Kelly McCormick in 87 North, working on developing different projects, and I've got a slate of scripts independent of them as well that I'm working on producing. So that's been my main focus. I love performing and getting in front of the camera, but producing is definitely where I'm at right now, and getting projects off the ground and helping new directors transition from the action world into first unit directing. So I can't talk about any specifics right now, but it's been an incredible learning curve for me. It's exciting. I'm being challenged, and it's exactly where I need to be right now.
And the last question before we get out of here, this one was asked to us a lot. You hear a lot of current and former Rangers throw around the mantra of once a Ranger, always a Ranger. So, asking a Power Ranger himself, do you hold that true? What does that mean to you?
For me, it definitely holds true. Immediately when you become a Ranger, you become part of a family. And when I was doing it, and I know it's the same today, it's just a different group. In order to achieve the number of episodes that they film, now instead of airing all the episodes during a single season, they'll air it over 2 seasons, 2 years, right? But in order to achieve 42 episodes in a single, 7, 8 month, filming period, you become part of this machine, and all of the cast and the crew have to work together very well in order to accomplish that. So you get brought into this family of people who are, they've been there, they've done that, and it's a very, very tight knit unit that you become part of for that 8 months of filming. And so then once it starts to air, you realize that, oh, you're part of this worldwide legacy that has come way before you, right? That's been established. And now you're the new person. But, after you're done, other people will come on, but then they bring you back. And, forever people, even now, today, when I travel internationally, more internationally than domestically, but whether it's an airport or out on the beach or some random market, people come up. They're like, Azul, right? Power Ranger Azul, right? And, whether it's in, Latin America or Italy, like people remember, and because their kids now grown up, right? And it never leaves them. So, there's always references in pop culture. There's references, that come back from the past, friends and family and just random people. So, it's like you can't escape it no matter what. But for me, it's a true honor being a martial artist, having so many friends that were part of the show on the second unit side. I mean, I was able. So I don't know if but now that I used to train David Leitch Chad Stahelski, the John Wick directors. So David Leitch, I was able to help bring him on as a guest star role during my season. He played the character Brian, and we had a great episode and fight and everything. And now he's the king of Hollywood action, directing Deadpool 2 and Hobbs and Shaw, and then Bullet Train. Now he just wrapped Fall Guy in Sydney and just came back. So and now I'm co-producing with him. So for me, it's like just this incredible moment in my life, but then it'll always be part of me and what I do, even now. So I can't say too much, but there's the 30th anniversary episode that's coming out, and you're going to see a new character come into the mix. It's already been advertised, but her name is Charlie Kersh. I trained her to win her world championship title. She won 2 last July, and then so we've been training, privately for the last couple of years, and then, helped her, get into the audition process for this character. Iris actually called me looking for a specific, ethnic background and girl with skills. And so, she fit the mark. She did great. And she got booked. So super excited about that, because it literally is a legacy, in being able to be part of that journey, with others, hand that down. And now she's going to play this special character that comes out very soon. I know people are excited about. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to see it. So it's a huge honor. So definitely those words, ring true for me, to the deepest level.
Awesome. Well, Mike, again, I thank you so much for being here. I know you are super busy. So the fact that you could find some time for us, I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.